Today at the National Press Club, the British High Commissioner to Australia, Vicki Treadell. The UK's first female High Commissioner of Asian heritage, who's been in the role since 2019, will discuss modern Britain's journey beyond colonialism. Vicki Treadell with today's National Press Club address.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the National Press Club and the Westpac address from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people in Canberra. My name is Laura Tingle, I'm the club's president. It seems to have taken a long time for a global discussion to have emerged about the impact of colonialism and the journey beyond it for many colonial powers around the world. European colonial ambitions shaped such a large part of the world over the past couple of centuries, and not always for the better. And there is still quite a lot of sensitivity in this discussion, as we saw after the comments of our own Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, in London recently. That makes us all particularly interested to hear what today's speaker has to say. UK High Commissioner Vicki Treadell has a very personal experience of the British colonial legacy. She was the first Foreign Office female High Commissioner of colour when she was posted to New Zealand. But the fallout of the colonial past also has much broader ramifications, particularly in our region. As Penny Wong said in her King's College speech, countries such as Britain would not find common ground in the Indo-Pacific region if they stayed sheltered in narrower versions of their histories. And that will be significant for Britain as it steps up its engagement in the region through the AUKUS arrangement, which will be outlined further next week, we think. If we could have your indulgence, the High Commissioner's voice is struggling a little bit today, but she's very gamely taking one for the team to speak to us, and please welcome her to the podium.
Thank you very much, Laura. There you've heard the voice. And on this International Women's Day, let's hope this woman's voice is not silenced. I have a plan B. If it should completely go, Apsara McNaught from my team will take over. Like me, Apsara has Sri Lankan heritage, and I thought that would be appropriate. Apsara right now is hoping that my voice will last. But before I begin, may I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I also acknowledge all of Australia's First Nations and recognise their place in Australia's history, indeed in global history, as the oldest living culture in the world. And can I acknowledge all the other beautiful cultures represented here by my ASEAN counterparts, by my Pacific counterparts, by my Five Eyes and European and other counterparts in the room. I'm blessed to have you all with us today, and particularly to the women. Happy International Women's Day. For me, in understanding our history and our colonial past, it is really important as we frame who we are today. But whilst I talk about modern Britain on this International Women's Day, I would also like to touch on my own journey as a British woman of Asian ancestry, a representative of modern multicultural Britain. Over 20 years ago, Robin Cook, our then Foreign Secretary, spoke of the reality of Britain in the 21st century. He reminded us London was established as the capital of a Celtic Britain by Romans from Italy. They were then driven out by Saxons and Angles from Germany. Richard the Lionheart spoke French and depended on the Jewish community of England to put up the ransom that freed him from prison. The idea that Britain was a pure Anglo-Saxon society before the arrival of communities from the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa is fantasy. But if this view of British identity is false to our past, it is certainly false to our future too. Foreign Minister Penny Wong recently made headlines, as Laura has referenced, at her speech at King's College in London, as is often the case with headlines, and even today. And I appreciate I'm on dangerous ground by making this point at the National Press Club. Some of the nuance was lost. I agree with Penny Wong. We must frame ourselves for who we are today. We must not let others constrain us in a past reality. Just as brevity is the enemy of complexity, the story of modern Britain is distilled by distance, a postcard of a painting that never was. To understand modern Britain is to understand that we must project with pride our modern multicultural reality. Our diversity and the inclusive society we strive for is who we are today. This is our nationhood, a nationhood that demands equality and fairness at home and abroad, values we share with Australia. Last year, the British Council and Australia's Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade explored this complexity in the landmark UK-Australia season. Over 1,000 British and Australian artists and educators collaborated across the globe to connect us with nuance, with beauty, with truth, all seeking to answer the question, who are we now? Britain may have influenced the world, but in turn, modern Britain has been shaped by the world. We do not forget history, but we must learn from it to inform our present and our future, to be the force for good that we wish to be. Next week, I celebrate 4 years in my role as British High Commissioner to Australia, and also as head of our 8-country Oceania network. You'll be pleased to know I have another year to go. Thank you. A significant part of my job has been to strengthen our presence across this region, broaden our engagement, and elevate our relationship with Australia to one of genuine strategic partnership. I am reminded in this endeavour of the dilemma faced by the mathematician Abraham Wald during World War II. Allied planes returned with significant bullet damage. The proposed solution was to add armour reinforcement. But where to add that reinforcement that would do the most benefit? Wald analysed data showing areas where returning planes had sustained bullet damage. Wald dismissed the intuitive answer to strengthen the parts of the plane that sustained the most damage. His advice was to reinforce the parts of the returning planes that showed the least damage. Why reinforce the part of the plane that came back unharmed? Because the planes that sustained damage to those areas never returned. Wald identified that sometimes reinforcement is needed in the least obvious place. Last year, we announced the return of a diplomatic consul general for Western Australia after a gap of nearly 20 years. In my first year here, we re-established a diplomatic consul general in Brisbane. With our consul generals based in Sydney and Melbourne, our diplomatic network is restored and re-established, covering all Australian states and territories. The history and ties between Australia and the United Kingdom might suggest less focus is needed in this part of the world. That is misguided. There's a phrase we like to use a lot about the Australia-UK relationship: the best of mates. The thing about mates is that you should never take them for granted. You have to work at it. That is why our foreign ministers spent 2 days together with their defence counterparts at Auckland last month to talk, to share, to understand, to challenge, to agree common purpose. James Cleverly and Penny Wong concluded at the end of Auckland that we are and remain the best of mates. True partnership requires renewal and growth, and that is what we are doing. Partnership like our modern dynamic free trade agreement, which will transform bilateral trade between our countries, or the UK's accession to the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. We invest in each other. In 2021, we were Australia's second largest source of foreign investment. In return, the UK is the second largest destination for Australian investment overseas. Relationships do not survive, even in your private lives, unless they recognize change and adapt to new dynamics. If not, we wake up one morning and realize we no longer recognize each other. So we are activists about this relationship, which matters deeply to us. Today, our Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, concludes our new Women and Girls strategy, which he's launching, built on the pillars of rights, freedom and potential, a priority agenda we share with Australia. I recently met with a Year 11 Australian student, a high-achieving young woman of Asian ancestry. I asked, as I often do of young people, where she hoped to be in 30 years. Prime Minister of Australia, she said. On this International Women's Day, it's heartening to recall her say this with a surety that belied not a dream, but a goal to be attained. It's an attitude we've sought to foster in the UK. We've made great strides in ensuring our Parliament represents the diversity of Britain. 13% of the people in the UK are from minority ethnic backgrounds. Today, 10% of our House of Commons are from minority ethnic backgrounds. Whilst we have made progress, there is still more to do, not least, as Penny Wong reminded us, how we project to the world. Yes, I represent the Britain of Bronte and Beckham, but I also represent the Britain of Mary Seacole and James Cleverly, of Riz Ahmed and Rishi Sunak, of Courtney Pine and Kemi Badenoch, and for the literary among you, of Zadie Smith and Hanif Qureshi. A Britain that addressed its legacy of the slave trade by leading the world in the abolition of slavery, passing the Slave Act in 1807. A Britain that initiated more recent time the global campaign against modern slavery. The Britain that led the world to COP26 and through the Glasgow Climate Pact kept 1.5 degrees alive, particularly important for our Pacific friends. And just in the last week, the Britain at the forefront of efforts to secure the landmark agreement on marine biodiversity at the United Nations, protecting 30% of our oceans by 2030. We are a Britain that has committed the equivalent of 7 billion Australian dollars in support of Ukraine. And I acknowledge my colleague Vasil. A Britain that has offered 218,000 Ukrainians safe haven in our country since the beginning of Russia's egregious invasion. A Britain that has offered Hong Kong Chinese people the opportunity to become citizens in Britain. And in true British style, we've done so, I believe, with a minimum of fuss. We do this because Britain will always stand against aggressors and stand up for freedom and democracy and every nation's sovereign right. And we do it with the will of the British people. I am proudly British, and I say this as someone born in Malaysia, without a drop of English, Welsh, Scottish, or Northern Irish blood coursing through my veins. In ethnic terms, I am Eurasian, the daughter of Chinese and Dutch burgher parents who migrated to Britain with me in tow, aged 8, because they trusted British values and believed in the opportunity Britain offered my sister and I. 10 million Britons are like me, foreign-born. On my first day in the Foreign Office, I had the common experience of many migrants at the time. The inevitable, yes, but where are you really from? My first boss, on greeting me, was bemused. He said, "I don't understand how you hope to be a member of Her Majesty's diplomatic service." I told him, "I am a legacy of empire, and you are reaping what you sowed." That was 1979. You can work out how old I am. A year later, and perhaps I could have referenced the big hit of the year at the cinema, The Empire Strikes Back. Over my career, I've not just seen the ongoing change in my own organization, whether in terms of ethnic diversity or gender or other difference. When I looked up the ladder then, on that first day, there was no one like me, never mind senior women. But today, women head our missions in Tokyo, Beijing, Singapore, Moscow, Paris, Berlin, Washington, Wellington, Ottawa, and at the United Nations. I was proud to make history and become the first female career diplomat of colour to become a High Commissioner when I went to New Zealand, where I first met Dame Annette King. I have seen my country transform too, address its history and its past. And as I've said, there is more work to do. But we have a yet more inclusive society where whoever you are and wherever your family came from, you can rise and achieve the highest office. I'm not sure we have an equivalent idiom of our American friends and their American dream. If we did, I'd say I'm proud of the British reality today. A reality where we have a Hindu Prime Minister of Indian heritage, a Foreign Secretary of Sierra Leone heritage, and yes, where the daughter of immigrants can start at the lowest level of the civil service and become the British High Commissioner to Australia. Next Monday is Commonwealth Day. This is the first since the nations of Gabon and Togo were admitted. Neither country has a colonial history with Britain, but their desire to join the family of nations that is the Commonwealth highlights the appeal of the Commonwealth ethos outlined by the late Queen Elizabeth. The Commonwealth is built on the highest qualities: friendship, loyalty, and the desire for freedom and peace. It is why Prime Minister Fiame of Samoa travelled to Kigali last year for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting to bring the Commonwealth to the Pacific in 2024, when Samoa will host CHOGM. As someone from this region, and through my postings across the Indo-Pacific, including a return to the country of my birth as British High Commissioner to Malaysia, I have the cultural awareness and understanding of this region. I believe this contributes to our understanding and the shape of our work and the advice that I provide to my government. My time in this role has overlapped with a huge period of significant change for Britain and the world. Our departure from the European Union meant Britain had to reassess its place in the world against the shifting currents of our geostrategic reality. Our integrated review, published in 2021, set out our plan. It made clear we are by geography a Euro-Atlantic nation, and the defence of Europe, our near neighbourhood, would always be a priority. Our commitment to NATO endures. And I acknowledge my friend and colleague Betty Pavlicek, the Croatian ambassador who's the co-contact for NATO here in Canberra. So as our commitment to NATO endures, so too our commitment to Ukraine to regain their sovereignty. But the integrated review also pointed to the importance of the Indo-Pacific and the need for us to engage in this region further. In recognition of ASEAN centrality, we have become an ASEAN dialogue partner. We want to work with ASEAN for ASEAN's aims and goals for their region. In recognition of our Pacific friends at the front line of climate impacts, we will use our convening power, as we did in Glasgow, to give you a global voice. Over the past 4 years, the UK has doubled our presence across the Pacific Island countries. We now have High Commissioners in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Samoa, and Vanuatu, with cross-accreditations to others. Just as it is my privilege to represent my country in Australia, our missions across the Pacific are privileged to learn from and support our Pacific friends. The creation of our new Pacific Development Unit here in Canberra at the High Commission, headed by our former High Commissioner to Vanuatu, Karen Bell, who's with us today, further underlines our commitment. We have established a strong network coupled with strategic oversight from those who understand the importance of the Indo-Pacific and have lived and worked in this region. This is a point of partnership. This is a point of pragmatism, not words on paper, but people on the ground. As our Foreign Secretary has said, Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific outcomes and economies and security are indivisible. 60% of global shipping passes through this region. Security, peace, and stability here affects us all. And the UK has always been a seafaring nation. Our contemporary ships, HMS Tamar and HMS Spey, represent our intention to maintain a permanent presence in the Indo-Pacific. Last year, Spey assisted the humanitarian response to the Tonga volcanic eruption. In the last week, thanks to our partnership with Australia, the UK delivered shelter kits to the government of Vanuatu to support their recovery effort after cyclones Judy and Kevin wreaked havoc. These climate impacts is why at COP26 in Glasgow, we announced £274 million for a new programme to improve climate resilience across the Indo-Pacific. Whether battling slave traders in history, or providing natural disaster relief today, or being alert to those who threaten a free and open Indo-Pacific, Britain will always support democracy and freedom worldwide. This is why we have committed to the AUKUS trilateral security and defence partnership between our country, Australia, and the United States. That wasn't a pause for effect. The drumbeat of reporting, responsible people in the room, and rumours about Pillar 1 will soon reach a crescendo. The optimal pathway is coming, and journalists in the room wouldn't be journalists if they don't use the post-speech Q&A to inveigle me for new information. It is a futile attempt. And so, to preempt this, let me say all will be known soon, and I cannot today speak to the specifics. What I can say is this: our historic AUKUS agreement reflects the unique trust between the UK, the United States, and Australia. It reflects our shared values and our joint commitment to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. In the face of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, it perhaps would have been understandable for the UK to pull focus. Instead, we have doubled down on our commitment to the Indo-Pacific. Our unwavering support for Ukraine has happened in parallel with the strengthening of our presence and our engagement in the Pacific. These are not separate issues. These are sides of the same coin. We recognize China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests. We also recognize these views may not necessarily be shared by others. Of course, we also recognize China's significance in world affairs. So diplomacy and engagement has never been more important. But let me also use a sporting analogy, because we know how you Aussies love your sports. A fair competition can only exist within a fair framework respected by all players. Competition between nations is healthy. Coercion is not. We will uphold the international rules-based system, including modernizing and reinforcing it in the light of experience and new global challenges like climate change. We will support Australia and our allies across the Indo-Pacific and anywhere the rules-based international order is threatened. This is the modern Britain that has been shaped by the world. This is the global Britain that understands the legacy and responsibility of empire. This is my Britain. If you'll indulge me just a little longer, I'll end with an Emily Bronte poem. I'm happiest now when most away. I can tear my soul from its mould of clay. On a windy night when the moon is bright and my eye can wander through whirls of light, when I am not and none beside, nor earth, nor sea, nor cloudless sky, but only spirit wandering wide through infinite immensity. This poem has special resonance for me, as it may for many diplomatic colleagues with us today. For me, whilst written in a different place and time, it speaks to this beautiful land and the spirit of its First Nations people, wandering wide through infinite immensity of time and space on this land called Australia today. Like Bronte, I'm happiest when most away, representing my nation in yours. I thank you for that privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. I suppose there's a lot we could cover here, but just taking up the point about post-colonial history and the region, when the UK, well, Britain is looking at the region now, you talked about the need to maintain the rules-based order, but do you feel you've got a special responsibility in the region because of your colonial past? And in particular, how has what has happened in Hong Kong perhaps changed the view of Britain about the region?
The events in Hong Kong are not the only defining factor. Our integrated review looked at a totality of issues and set out a map and a pathway for us. This is a region that is the economic powerhouse of the world. It is important that we engage. And of course, we have a history with many countries, but we need to redefine those relationships in a modern and contemporary context. We are seeking partnerships of equals, or partnerships where we can help others who need that help. But we want to know what people want. It is not us telling the world. It is listening to what our friends and partners tell us. To listen and to learn, and then look at what is appropriate for us to do. In the case of Hong Kong, there was a treaty. We stand by it. We encourage China to do so as well. But for Hong Kongers who do not feel safe, we want to give them a pathway to our country, because that is a responsibility we hold.
Anna Henderson.
Anna Henderson, SBS World News. High Commissioner, we're in challenging international economic conditions and inflation's running very high in Britain at the moment. We are expecting the AUKUS details to be announced next week, including a big increase, quite likely, in defence spending across all three countries. Do the people of Britain, in your knowledge and with your insights, support this kind of spending when cost of living is so high? And how long will the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spend on the ground in San Diego before he has to hand down his budget?
Well, I don't know the details of where he's going to be, so if you're correct, you're ahead of me. Let me be clear. The British people have seen what happens when we do not support the defence and security. They've seen Russia's attack on the Ukraine. I believe the British people absolutely get the need for deterrence and to strengthen security around the world. You know, I can't speak for every citizen, every fellow citizen, but I can tell you that this is a commitment of our government and that of the US and of Australia. It's about a capability that our Australian friends need in a contested world to have the solutions that they will need for the long term. We don't question that. We support it, as allies and friends do. And can I just deal with the economic cost and the high inflation we are seeing? Again, a lot of that can be attributed to Russia's egregious invasion of Ukraine. The cutting off of grain that is sitting in Odessa and other ports has caused a spike in the cost of wheat, which is raising the cost of food. So food supply and energy supply have become acute issues because of one illegal act that has had a ripple effect across the world. Of course, we need to recover from this, and that's why we are doing what we're doing. And part of that is to look at how we regenerate our economy, how we transition even faster to renewable energy, which is what we're doing, how we support others to do so as well. And that means new industry, and that means new enterprise, that means new jobs, and that means wealth creation. That's why we have the FTA. We want more British companies to get out there globally and export so that they increase their production at home. They can open new production lines and create new jobs. That is the only way to achieve the outcomes that we need in the medium to long term.
Thank you.
Matthew Knott.
Thank you for your speech today. I won't try and unveil you for too many details, but Opposition Leader Peter Dutton last week said that he favoured an American model submarine for Australia under the AUKUS Pact, and he gave various reasons why he didn't think a British submarine would be suitable, from interoperability here and the capacity of British shipyards. Were his remarks accurate, and did they cause offence in the UK?
Well, I told Mr. Dutton myself last night that I didn't agree with his view.
And why did you do that, and can you elaborate a bit on that?
Because he's commenting on an outcome that he doesn't yet know.
And is that inappropriate for him to do so?
There's a lot of speculation, and everyone is entitled to speculate. I was simply pointing out that I did not think such expressions were helpful on what is a genuine trilateral partnership started under his government.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. It's a trifecta. Sarah Eisen.
Thank you. Sarah Eisen from The Australian. Just on what someone from the government has talked about, Pat Conroy has urged the British military to buy buy more, Australian military products and so on, and really talk about doing more in that space. Do you think that's something that Britain can really do right now? Is that something that is being actively looked at?
Isn't that the whole point of the FTA and our accession to the CPTPP, to open up each other's markets for more British and Australian companies to trade with each other, to increase the investment we make in each other's countries? So here's a story. When China stopped importing all your delicious, beautiful wine exports to Britain went up 26%. So there is an appetite, literally, for Australian product in the UK. And likewise, we're seeing growth of particular sectors here for British product. We haven't even had the FTA come into effect, and British cheeses are going great guns in Australia.
Do you think that in the FTA, Britain is really going to buy more from Australia in the defence capability? Is that something we are going to see once the FTA comes into effect?
The fact that we are in partnership, not just on a future solution for Australia's submarine capability, what we're already doing on the Type 26 frigate, tells you all you need to know. We are integrating supply chains. We're looking at how we develop the skills and capacity in our workforce that we both need. This is a win-win for both countries and America as well.
Andrew Green.
High Commissioner Andrew Green from the ABC. Bearing in mind that you don't want to talk about AUKUS, I'll ask about asylum policy. Britain is in many ways emulating the policies of Mr Dutton's previous government that you referenced. What have you been reporting back to the UK about the success or otherwise of Australia's asylum policies, and have you noticed any concerns about the way your country is pursuing this?
As a good public servant, I send back factual information to my government. Look, we have a challenge on the Channel. Last year, 45,000 people tried to cross it. It's highly dangerous. And what we want to make sure is that the illegal smuggling gangs who are making money out of people's desperation should be stopped. There are proper channels for genuine asylum seekers to find a route to Britain. As I highlighted earlier in my speech, ours is a country of compassion. 218,000 Ukrainians have been offered a home in Britain. I know that Vasil will want them all to go home once peace is restored. We have offered a safe haven to Hong Kong Chinese. We will take our fair share of refugees. But what we want to do is to stop the highly risky, highly dangerous crossing of the English Channel. And we want to stop the illegal smugglers who are really, it's an evil, evil trade that we want to stop. That's what our government is trying to do.
Ellen Ransley.
Hi Commissioner, Ellen Ransley from NCO Newswire. Thank you for your speech. Well done getting through it with no voice. Obviously you don't want to talk about AUKUS, so I'm going to change tact a little bit. King Charles will not be on the next iteration of the $5 note. It emerged that this wasn't necessarily communicated with Britain before it was publicly announced. Do you think that could have been handled better? And what do you think this says about modern Australia's relationship with the monarchy?
But why should Australia tell Britain what it wants to do with its own currency when you are a realm in your own right? It's none of our business.
What do you think it says about our relationship?
That it's grown up.
Simon Gross.
Simon Gross from Canberra IQ. I'm going to change tack and talk about the price of energy. Excuse me, I've got your voice problem. You've got an energy price guarantee scheme in Britain and an energy bill support scheme grant system. The energy bill support scheme grant is going to be stopped next month, and you push the actual price guarantee up. So according to what I've read, the household energy prices will rise 43% in April compared to a year before. Can you talk about how that's going to affect the economy and households? And can you also perhaps reflect on how your system is better than the Australian system to control energy prices?
Well, on your last point, I simply wouldn't comment on that. Look, between now and the deadline of our energy price cap, we have another budget. So I wouldn't prejudge where we might be. What I would say is the government understands the impact on households in the UK. That's why the price cap was extended. So let us wait and see. But it comes back to the point. The faster we make our energy transition and the faster we move over to an entire months, weeks, years of renewable, the better for the UK. But I've been home and I know what it feels like for people, and I know my government gets that too.
Thank you.
Tom McElroy.
Thank you for your speech, High Commissioner. Tom McElroy from the Financial Review. You said that Mr Dutton's comments on the model sub were unhelpful. Is the possibility of the American sub being chosen a potential for tension with London?
Look, I'm not going to comment on a highly speculative assumption. Let's wait and see what the announcement says, then let's talk about it.
We're doing a lot of changing of tack here, I notice, but we're not sort of sailing in a forward direction. Daniel Hurst.
Daniel Hurst from The Guardian. Following up Andrew's question earlier about asylum seeker policy, and there was the bill announced overnight which the UNHCR says virtually extinguishes the right to seek refugee protection in the UK for people who arrive irregularly. Just following on the point of the information you send back home about factual information about Australia's policy, have you also reported back about the consequences of people who've spent a decade in indefinite detention, people who've had severe health impacts and deaths in detention? And just to further the point, what is the risk? What advice have you given about not demonising asylum seekers as part of this stop the boats rhetoric?
Look, the British government wants to make sure that when asylum seekers come to our country, they can be properly looked after, have a decent environment. The issue is with an influx of the level that we're having at the moment. We're not giving them the humanity necessarily, when they land with nothing. So I really don't want to be drawn on this. The bill was introduced. It is the position of my government as a way to better manage this and to make sure that asylum seekers have a safer passage to the UK.
Kim Bergman.
Kim Bergman from Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. Thank you for your speech. My question is about sport. No, just fooling. It's also about defence technology. In your speech, in a slightly different context, you spoke about the importance of fairness and competition. A few months ago, Australia decided to buy new transport aircraft from the United States without even asking the European supplier of the A400M to even bid. I'm wondering what the reaction of British companies was to that. And in that context, are you concerned that while everyone focuses on nuclear-powered submarines, the British offering for our defence satellite communications network might also be dropped?
Well, on your first question, you should ask British companies what their views are, because I don't speak for them individually. Look, it's Australia's choice what equipment they choose, and we don't interfere with that.
Okay.
If I could just seek a little bit of elaboration. While I understand you don't want to talk about the AUKUS decision that we're expecting, how important are the non-nuclear submarine aspects of the deal for the UK, given what you're saying about your involvement in the Indo-Pacific? I mean, there's been a whole tranche of suggestions made about relationships with security and technology. Are we too focused on just the submarine component?
It's understandable why people are focusing on the submarine, because that's pillar one. Pillar two, which talks about other technology and capability, is progressing as well. And I think once we hear about the submarine outcome and how that will work, no doubt all the journalists in the room will switch their attention to pillar two, and we can enjoy lots of questions on that to come.
Okay, Ben Westcott.
Ben Westcott from Bloomberg. Thank you very much for your speech, High Commissioner. Herculean effort. I want to ask, given your speech has been about the great relationship between Australia and the UK and our long-standing ties, when do you think the UK-Australia Free Trade Agreement will be approved in the UK?
Well, it's in our House of Lords at the moment, and the Lords have to do what the Lords have to do. But their report should come back to the House of Commons on around the 12th or 13th of March. And then it will take the Commons probably another 2-3 weeks. But I don't want to put a time cap on it if there is further debate. And then it will complete its legislative process through our Parliament. The moment that is done, because you beat us to it at the end of your last sitting week of the last calendar year, with both countries having completed our parliamentary processes, it should come into effect pretty soon afterwards. So you do the math.
Thank you.
Tess Economou.
Thank you, High Commissioner. You touched on understanding Britain's colonial past. A number of museums in the UK hold the remains and important cultural artefacts of Indigenous people. Do you believe they should be returned to their communities in Australia as part of understanding that past?
I think all our institutions and museums in the UK understand this. And indeed, many items have been returned. One of the most lasting memories I will have of my time here in Australia, and Craig Ritchie is in the room, was accompanying some members of his team and people from Manchester Museum returning sacred and cultural and secret items to the Gangalida and people of Burketown in far north Queensland, and spending 2.5 days with that community and seeing what it meant to them. Of course we understand the significance of that. And the thing I would remark on was the warmth with which I was personally received as the representative of the country to which those items had been taken. You know, there is a reason why Australia has a reconciliation program, and this is about reconciliation. And just in the last week, we've had news that Trinity College, Cambridge, their museum there, are returning 4 of the Gwegal spears to the community in Botany Bay, and many others have happened. So it's through a process of understanding, it's through a process of dialogue, and we will see more returns come as individual institutions will take that path.
But if the significance of them is understood, why are these remains still being held?
We have to understand that different organisations and institutions have constitutions. Sometimes it's because it's within the law, and sometimes these things take time to unravel, unpick. If life was simple, we wouldn't be having this question.
But the UK government can change the Act, which, for example, prevents the British Museum from returning parts of its collection.
Yes, it can, but you understand legislative agendas and the priorities of government. You know, this is a live debate. It may surprise many people, but in my own organisation, we have research analysts. And a big piece of their work in the last 2 or so years has been researching our colonial history so that we as diplomats can understand it and address it. There's been a wonderful report done by one of our research analysts who will be visiting soon on our colonial legacy and history with the Pacific Islands. And we need to confront that, and we need to understand it, and that will inform the way we work and how we develop the very modern partnerships I have been talking about. We can dig around and, you know, open old wounds when actually this should be about healing and moving forward and actually respecting each other for who we are today.
Thank you.
Nick Stewart.
Nick Stewart from the Canberra Times. As you know, strategy is geography, and now that England, the UK, is no longer part of Europe, you have moved away from that. But nevertheless, you and the United States, the 2 members of AUKUS, both maintain your own independent nuclear deterrence. Why shouldn't Australia develop its nuclear deterrent? Recently, the UK, just a couple of years ago, the UK decided to renew its independent nuclear deterrent. Why shouldn't Australia have its own? If you say we're able to have the secrets of the nuclear submarine, the propulsion secrets, why not nuclear secrets as well, missile secrets?
Well, can I deal with a point you made earlier? We haven't left Europe. We're still a European country. And I'm sure some of my European friends in the room will agree.
You're not a member of the EU?
No, that's right. And that's a different thing. Look, it's not for us to say and comment on what Australia should or shouldn't have. Australia has a very clear and proud position on non-proliferation, and the care with which we are making, laying the foundations for nuclear propulsion and Australia's obligations to the IAEA are not in any doubt. And can I just dispel the conflation of propulsion with proliferation? You know, Australia has a very clear position, and it's not for me to comment on whether or not they should or should not have X, Y, or Z.
So why does the UK require its own independent deterrent?
Well, take a look at what's happening on our continent right now.
So if we're concerned about Asia, we should similarly get an independent...
Well, I think you should ask the Australian government that question. It's not for me to answer.
Not a clear answer to me at all.
It is not for me to comment on what Australia should or should not have.
Okay.
Australia is signatory to the Rarotonga Treaty.
Yep, exactly.
Luke Itaman.
Thanks, High Commissioner. Luca Itimani from the Australian Financial Review. So as you mentioned, Britain's been making great strides towards decolonisation and engaging with its colonial past. How does an Australian voice to Parliament, or perhaps a treaty with its First Nations peoples, fit into that vision? Would you support a voice to Parliament, or would you encourage Australia to adopt one?
I'll share a little story with you. Not long after the AUKUS announcement, an Australian journalist came up to me and said, "Isn't this just the old Anglosphere ganging up?" And I did point out to that journalist that he's Australian, with the oldest living culture in the world, and this country, by definition, therefore, is not part of the Anglosphere. And I think I've made my points about my own country. So, coming back to your question, I think it's absolutely correct, and Australia has been going through this process of recognising its history before the white man came. This is part of that evolution, and I think that is absolutely for Australia to determine its path going forward.
Would you support a voice to Parliament? Would you encourage Australians to adopt one?
I think it's important that all the people, but particularly the First Nations of Australia, are recognised in this country's constitution.
Thank you.
Anna Henderson.
Thank you. Back again. Julian Assange is still being held in Belmarsh prison. Human rights activists have called on the UK to prevent his extradition. So what obligations does the UK have to Mr Assange? What representations has the UK received from Australia over Julian Assange, and do you consider his work journalism?
On the 30th of June, Julian Assange applied to the High Court in the UK for leave to appeal against the decision for his extradition. As there is an ongoing legal proceeding, it would be inappropriate for me to comment.
I appreciate perhaps on that side of things with the legal aspect of this, but as to whether he's a journalist, what is your view?
I don't have a view to express on that.
And as for what Australia may have said in this conversation with international allies, is there not any light you can shed on that engagement?
You know, the Australian government raises this issue, as Penny Wong acknowledged herself when she was asked a very similar question in London earlier last month.
Sarah Ison.
Also back again. Just trying to keep it quite broad and not ask for specifics, but with AUKUS, if AUKUS is a genuinely trilateral endeavour, as the UK has said, as Australia has said, is Britain prepared to align its requirements, its defence requirements, with those of its other partners?
In any partnership, it is about how we work together, how we deliver together. So there will be an interoperability in the way we move forward together.
And that could mean Britain modifying its own systems to align?
Well, you'll have to wait and see.
Thank you.
Our final question is from Tom McElroy.
Thanks again, High Commissioner. Would you support an extension of AUKUS to include Japan, for example, on advanced technology?
Look, on Pillar 2, there are technologies that we know a number of like-minded partners are keen to be part of. So until we get into the detail of how that moves forward and who may have a technology or an opportunity to work with us, we shall see.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you all agree that there should be a gold star and koala stamp for the High Commissioner's efforts today with a very suave voice. So thank you very much for addressing us today.